Welcome to the LiveO2 podcast.
Sometimes you've got to do what's right for you and not do what's right for everybody else.
Then you have to take the steps to manage your health.
We're here to help you learn how to better live your day. Live your day.
Good morning, Tom. How are you on this Friday?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. How are you?
Good. I am also doing well. I'm excited to have this second episode teed up because we've had some really great questions from our Facebook group. So thank you guys for submitting for round 2. Tom and I felt that the first episode went really well. So we wanted to open up and take around half an hour to answer the second round of you guys' questions. So thank you for participating. For those of you who haven't yet figured out how this works or what to do, inside our private Facebook group, which is LiveO2 for the people, I will link up to that if you are not yet a member. So we post from time to time for you guys to ask questions to Tom, who is our VP, and we're going to try and do one of these a month. We maybe will do more at the moment. We're feeling pretty busy these days, but we like to try and reach out to you guys at least once a month. So that is the purpose of this. With that long introduction, Tom, let's go ahead and get started.
All right. Sounds good.
Cool. Okay, so the first question I wanted to ask was a pretty interesting one, and it comes from Ash Scott. And Ash says, how can one check the oxygen concentration level that the compressor is delivering? Is it possible for it to be just filling the bag with air? I don't think I have an issue, but I do like to check things. And then also, Tom, just for a little bit of context, there was a lot of comments on this post, and it seems like what Ash is doing is judging his pulse oximeter reading for his level of oxygen. He says that he remains around 98% all the time. So that's just a little bit of context, but how would you address his question?
Yeah, this is a really good thread. You know, Ash, in terms of your system, the air separators are, designed with a low oxygen light. And if you ever see that light on, that's going to be an indication that something is not quite right in the oxygen production. And if that light's on for longer than 15 minutes, usually it's a good case to give us a call or send us an email if it's something that can't easily be straightened out. Sometimes the air separators get, pushed against a wall. Just recently we were at an event and we sucked the curtain in from the adjoining booth, and we didn't know that for hours. So they do draw a little bit of air into them, and we just need to give them space to function. If you're in a normal air environment, you shouldn't have any trouble, producing enough oxygen that's going to keep that light from coming on. And that's going to generally provide approximately 80 to 90% oxygen at the mask. Now, what's interesting about this is your body really doesn't perceive too much difference between 80 and 100% oxygen. And we've got some older videos out there where, a participant is saying, I'm breathing 100% oxygen. We're actually at about 80%. So I'm setting the record straight there, but there's no tangible benefit from 80 to, 100. The other thing that's interesting too is your body doesn't have the ability to absorb all of the oxygen that we're providing it. So what Ash is going through is, moving on to, we're now looking at what's happening in Ash's physiology, where he's saying on normal room air, when I'm not exercising, I'm exhaling 16.5% oxygen. And when I'm on the bag, breathing approximately 85% oxygen, that's around 84%, which he feels is much higher than he expected. And there are a lot of dependent items in here. Your body is getting, 4 times as much oxygen as it normally would receive. So the dependencies here are, are you exercising? I don't know if Ash is using a standard system or an adaptive contrast. So it might be we need to spend a little more time creating more demand in Ash's body for oxygen before we would see that number actually go down and he would start absorbing more. It depends on his, intensity is really what's happening there. Sometimes it can even depend on whether you're breathing quickly or breathing slower. A lot of times folks will get on a system, and even though they're feeding better than, breathing better than 80% oxygen, they'll breathe really fast. And we kind of have to reprogram ourselves to say, okay, this is oxygen rich air. We can actually let it, take a deeper breath and actually expand our lungs and pressurize our system just by lightly holding our breath. And as people start to use their system and they're in those comfortable areas where they're not breathing so hard, they'll actually consciously start to slow down that breath and hold it for a little bit. And this is a great process for basically expanding and pushing out your rib cage. There are all these great stories out there about athletes who've been really good, and what they were really good at a young age was expanding their rib cage and growing the ability to have basically larger lungs. Now this ability reduces as we get a little bit older, but when we're, I would say, at least up to age 40, we probably can make some differences there. We certainly talked to half dozen people here recently that are well over 40, in their 60s and 70s, that are still talking about improvements in their breathing. There's all the intercostal muscles, the diaphragm. We want people to be breathing deep into their belly. We want people to be breathing through their sides. Want people breathing down into their low back. I mean, these are interesting things, but you can create that chamber, that your lungs can expand into, even up into your, top of your shoulders. You can take your breaths that deep and think of it as just exercising the lungs as an organ. Now, Ash is asking me, does this sound normal or correct? And really quickly, we get out of the science and move into the art. And the art is where you're getting to know your physiology. And there, I want to answer the question, but there are probably so many dependencies on what's actually happening. I don't know Ash's age. I don't know what he's doing for exercise. I don't know his system. I do know he's in the UK. and what we get down to here is pulse oximetry is the simple tool that we get into for looking at oxygen bound to the blood. And even that is a simple metric that we like, and we rely on it to say, okay, the person is desaturating, indicating that there's all of a sudden a shortage of oxygen in the body. And then when they resaturate up and flash 100, we know we've got the best saturation in terms of oxygen bound to the blood. But even there, that's not the key thing we want to look at. We actually want to look at how much of that oxygen is getting excited and dropping off into the plasma of the blood. We want to dissolve the oxygen into the fluids of the body. Our CEO, Mark, he says, look, think of your body as a bucket of water. And it's what's in that water that's going to allow us to dissolve oxygen better. Of course, you need an excess of oxygen to do that, but it gets into the bioterrain. And this is an important component that I think is largely overlooked. We need a fluid body, but then we need a really nice ORP. And without getting too scientific, ORP is our oxidative reduction potential. When we have I believe it's a negative ORP, we can actually dissolve more oxygen into the body. And that typically is a result of having an alkaline, slightly alkaline physiology, and also one where we've exercised and we've created voltage from the relaxation and contraction of the muscles. And we also have the proper mineralization to actually create this nice water in our body that holds more oxygen. Now that's probably a long way around on trying to answer what seems like a fairly simple question. What Manfred van Arden looked at, he would actually go in and measure the blood gases while somebody was exercising. And that's not a method that we can use. But if we use his formula, we know we can get the same results. And, Manfred was up in this area of, 2.5 to 4. And then some of his results showed much more than that in terms of dissolved oxygen in the plasma. So, Ash has got a calculation saying, 2.5 times as much oxygen being used when he's on his system breathing oxygen. I would say, yes, you're getting a result. And there's also some room for improvement or room for better testing methods. Here's where you want to go is you want to listen to your body. The best advice that was given to Manfred van Arden as he was going in to basically run the clinic in Germany, he had asked an older doctor who was kind of on his way out in terms of retiring, but who was about 85. And Manfred said, what's your secret for health into, older age? And the doctor looked at him and said, you want to breathe hard for 10 minutes each day. And that's really the secret, where we have enough turbulence in the body. We have the right mix of oxygen coming into the body. We have the right demand of oxygen on the body, where we can get it really loaded up with oxygen. And, that 10-minute phrase of breathing hard for 10 minutes each day, it's the challenge we need to actually provide stimulus so our body will maintain what it has and improve upon that. That's the best answer I have for you, Ash, aside from recommending really expensive medical equipment to find out exactly what's happening where. I don't think you're going to get really accurate numbers using an oxygen meter to figure out that through exhalation, but I can say you're in the ballpark. In terms of your saturation being 97, 98, 99, between training and not training, if you're using a LiveO2 standard system, I would say it's probably a good indication that you want to go ahead and upgrade to an adaptive contrast, so that you can start challenging your body to drop its saturation, create a higher demand, and then it sounds like you have good oxygen utilization already, so your recovery time will come back up. But I'm guessing that you have a standard system if you're in that range most of the time. So I would say probably moving into some of the intermittent hypoxic training is where you want to go.
Ash, I hope that answers your question. Next question we have is from a returning asker. Ashoka, I believe, is our Aussie buddy. And he says, can you mention different ways we can measure biological age versus chronological? Or it would be nice if we could somehow measure the anti-aging effects of LiveO2.
Yes, absolutely. Boy, I'm really jumping between the science and the art of this. I'm trying not to, and what I'm trying to balance is home users and practitioners are probably going to go about this differently, right? You can go on. There's a really quick, simple test that you at least ought to look at, even if you don't take it. It's at biological-age.com. And you go on and take a simple survey. And this is based on study research. And it's simple questions. How much do you exercise each week? How many drinks do you have daily? Do you tend to be stressed? Do you tend to be happy or unhappy? But what I like about this is, do you eat your vegetables? Do you drink your water? These are simple things. And they're all adjustments that you can make that literally cost you nothing, that will affect your biological age. Now, that's a survey. That's a way to get it. And certainly with LiveO2, we can help on the exercise component of that question is, how many times a week do you exercise and with what intensity? So if you score higher on that question, yes, we're going to reduce your biological age in forms of that survey. So that's great for anybody who at home or practitioner, how these things actually are going to affect your biological age. Now, getting more scientific, we have worked with HeartMath, and they have several tools to look at this. They have, where they've started to focus is emotional balance. So that's a way to look at your biological age. And this is really true. Anybody that's ever been in sales, realizes that a lot of times sales are not logical decisions. They're, intangible things that emotionally tug us one way or the other. And this is written about. Our emotions are 100 times stronger than our logical minds, and it's why we do things. Has anybody ever had the experience of coming back from the mall and realizing, why did I buy that? Or coming, maybe you came back from the car dealership and you said, why did I buy that? Something got in your emotional space and you made a decision, based on that. And it's called buyer's remorse. It's something we don't experience a whole lot of at LiveO2, but the idea is still there in terms of emotional response predicting our health and our physiology. So we like HeartMath a lot for that. It's very science-based. You can get really deep into this pretty quickly. They have a very simple tool that I think is less than $200 called the Inner Balance, and it actually measures off of about 6 breaths. Now, we met, I can't remember Tom's last name, at a neurological conference about a year ago. And he came and took a Inner Balance test and then trained with us and then took another Inner Balance test and sent us the results. And he had really nice improvements just after one session. So the idea of tracking this and, finding out where you are, but then the most important test you do is the second one to see whether you've got an improvement or, I guess it could be non-improvement or it could even be worsening. So, the idea is picking a technology or a metric to track. And there are a whole lot of them out there. I just saw one the other day that was a kind of a handheld wireless device that would measure your body metrics and, produce an ongoing graph through an app that would tell you things like your percentage of body fat and your exercise that you'd done that day. But in terms of looking at your biological age, HeartMath is a good choice. The others that I'm familiar with and that we've used at one point or another, there's a company called iHeart Labs, and we'll have these links for you. iHeart Labs is actually a pulse oximeter that is going to, and I think less than $200. iHeart Labs is going to give you a calculated biological age. And we've seen some really nice improvements on this just based on a few exercises, a few sessions. And really as short as one session can produce some really drastic results. And this corresponds with, wow, I had a page open and I closed it. It corresponds with Manfred Van Arden's work, where he looked at individuals that were in a weakened state of physiology, and they were looking at spirometric findings. So this is actually the velocity of which you can breathe out, and then probably doing some of the air analysis. but they were seeing an 80% increase in persons of, weakened physical health. And that 80% increase was coming in the form of CO2 production. And the important thing about CO2 production is it is it's proportional to how much, he calls them energy rich phosphates, but what he's talking about is ATP. So this is the currency of the body. And we had Mark was at a conference and answering a question from Joe Mercola, and the question was, how much ATP does your body produce daily? Should it be producing daily? And we were all way off. But Joe Mercola's answer is that it produces about your body weight in ATP if you have a healthy oxygen utilization and healthy mitochondria. You're producing your body weight in ATP. So it gives you an idea of how much energy production is going on in our system. So when we can take somebody and improve their CO2 production at rest by 80%, that means they were maybe only producing 20% of what they needed to in terms of energy, or less. So in terms of this tracking, it becomes important to see what we can do. So what we like from iHealth is the pulse oximeter. It works nice because we're actually, normally utilizing pulse oximetry in what we're doing, and iHealth just takes it to the next space where it has an app where it can actually calculate a biological age for you off of that. And the ideal scenario is what you want to see is your biological age as you become better at what you're doing and your body improves. You want to see your biological age dropping. There's another piece of equipment called Max Pulse that this one is a little bit more gauged towards a practitioner. But the idea here, the cardio group has put it together, and their whole objective is to look at the arterial elasticity. And they're looking at heart rate variability, and they measure it through sympathetic and parasympathetic dominance, which is an emotional component in the body. And what's also happening there is they grade you against a set demographic population. So you find out, are you in the top percentile of your age group? So you're getting real-time reference. Now, I think that unit is upward of 10 grand, but it's also something that has a insurance billable code, or you might be able to find a practitioner nearby that has one and can run it for you regularly. And it's a lot of information. And over the course of a month, we have had individuals that ranked 7. The scale goes from 1 to 7, and 7 is kind of like we should be ready to call the ambulance, and improved their elasticity and heart rate variability to a number 2, to a level 2. So that's a huge improvement in a month and on a protocol with supplementation. But what they were doing every day was doing LiveO2 adaptive contrast.
Alrighty, thanks, Tom, for that thorough answer. I think you provided several options there. So Ashoka, I hope that answers your first question, and we'll get to your second one shortly. But before that, let's talk about Alan Sprinkle's question. He asked a really good one, and one that I've also been wondering about as well. He says, will EWOT help peripheral neuropathy?
Yeah, Alan has been with us for a while and has some amazing stories. I'm curious why he's asking this. And the process I'll go through is, we need to understand peripheral neuropathy a little bit differently. It's commonly associated with advanced phases of diabetes. What we need to understand or visualize is, for our nerves to degenerate, this part of our body, the periphery, so usually happens below the knee and in the feet. It's a loss of sensitivity. It's a tingling of the nerves, can be in the hands. Our body has gone through enough of a voltage decline and oxygen deficiency that it's now, the nerves are degenerating and dying. And this is their last little signal that they can send to ask us to do something, right? I mean, the body is sending us a message, and we have to think about it in the way of, we have not had enough oxygenated blood flow to that part of the body for it to actually maintain its structure and frame. So first, what happens here is the blood flow probably reduces in the amount of oxygen it's delivering. Then probably the blood flow reduces altogether. There's no longer nutrients or oxygen getting into the tissue, and there's also none of the waste products being removed from the tissue. That causes the tissue to actually start to lose voltage. And this is what we call a brownout. It's part of the body that has lost its energy. And at this point, it can't even hold oxygen. So we like to, we have doctors that are peripheral neuropathy specialists. It's all they do. And if we look at their methodology, they put everything on the table to try to turn this around as quick as possible, because they know if this continues, it literally leads to an amputation or an open, a sore that won't heal. And that's kind of the next phase of this, is that, okay, you have a skin tear or a sore that develops and it won't heal. And the sad part about this is the really only option there, if it gets bad enough, is amputation. And we've had some people save their legs and save themselves from wheelchairs, using LiveO2 and other modalities to get that blood flow back. And it's not just the blood flow, it's the oxygenation and the voltage in that tissue, so it can actually repair itself. So when we look at peripheral neuropathy, the answer to Alan's question is yes. I like adaptive contrast better than just what we call EWOT. But if we combine LiveO2 adaptive contrast with modalities like Juvent and red light therapy and PEMF is pulsed electromagnetic fields, and even something as simple as a warm water foot bath with Epsom salts, or lemon or cinnamon. You can buy packs that it's a pepper foot bath, that actually help that vasculature in the leg to open up. There's some supplements you can take. Over 40, I recommend a product called Human In, which is a free nitric acid supplement that'll help that vasculature. I think we're going to get a chance to talk about that in a little bit. And then we have to look at peripheral neuropathy and exercise that part of the body as much as we can. The travesty is sometimes the peripheral neuropathy comes on, and all of a sudden a person doesn't feel as stable walking, so they reduce their number of footsteps a day, and really that just accelerates the process here. The body gets less circulation. What is so great about walking and moving the lower extremities and just being in motion, our soles of our feet have a real important purpose. We know that our heart pushes our blood, and that goes to our tissues. And then we have this other thing called the lymph system. What moves the lymph system? It's actually the soles of our feet. That's what actually pushes the lymph system. We hear about people having surgeries, and the medical staff will say, okay, you've had a surgery, but we need to get you up and walking. The reason for that is we need to move that lymph system so that it doesn't clog up and doesn't become so swollen that we have a problem. It's also good for the blood and helps alleviate any blood clotting. But that walking process is what moves the lymph. Juvent is great for that. PEMF is an important part of the peripheral neuropathy equation because it's going to help return voltage to those tissues. And when we have voltage there, we can dissolve more oxygen and get better blood flow in. Red light is a really, I think it's cutting edge, but it's been around for years. But the red light actually goes in and stimulates our cells and our mitochondria and helps them heal at a faster rate. So all those would be things I would look at, and then I would go after the simple nutritional, macronutrients that are going to help you actually heal, the nerves and the vascular system to get that back to functional tissue. And if you're experiencing peripheral neuropathy, you just have to decide that you can change this and work with your practitioner to go about it.
Tom and I had to take a break, guys. So we recorded half of the Q&A, and now we are back on a different day to record the second part of this. So welcome back, Tom. Hope you got a big glass of water because we're getting ready to talk supplements. Ashoka asks, could you please explain what the various supplements suggested in some of the advanced protocols do, i.e. what function in the body does each one do? He would like to be able to understand these better himself and explain them better to his clients. So apparently Ashoka probably has a location or a site where he is training people, but this also obviously applies to other folks who are just training. So this is probably the number one question, and I don't know if we're going to be able to spend enough time on it. It's a lifetime of learning here now, and we live in a world where I get bombarded with emails about here is the newest thing for, platelet aggregation, or, here's the thing that dilates your coronary arteries. Mm-hmm. And what's cool is most of them are of natural source and origin. Now, when Manfred van Arden was doing this work, and I will send you to the page 127 of his book, he has a list of drugs and their doses. Now, he was calling a lot of things drugs. And in some cases, something like, vitamin C given at a really high dose is perceived as a drug. Most of these that we're going to look at and focus, we're talking about orally taking them and getting them into the system, giving them 45 minutes to really get in the bloodstream and absorbed, and using them that way. There are doctors that we work with that do IVs while the person is actually using the LiveO2 system. What better way to get a chelation IV or, any number of things into the bloodstream and pushed deep into our tissues. It's a neat process, but you need to be a medical doctor to do that. So I'll either tell you to go see those medical doctors and be safe and respectful of your body, or understand and take the oral versions of what they're using, and you'll get nice results. You just won't have like the thunder and lightning results that they get, but you will get the same results over time. So on page 127, Manfred goes through what he calls drugs and their doses. I'll read out the ones that actually aren't drugs, but most are focused on either improving the defense of the body or, providing some amount of vasodilation or supporting our Krebs cycle. In the Krebs cycle, oxygen is a part of it, free hydrogen is a part of it, B vitamins, all these coenzymes that actually support our aerobic respiration. If you go into any functional doctor, the key supplements that they're going to prescribe to you are all of the supplements that support the Krebs cycle. And not many people realize, they're actually treating me so I can utilize more oxygen for longer and have better health.
So you could easily make a career out of that. I'll talk about the ones that Manfred lists and the ones that I really like. There's going to be some overlap because I'm working off of 2 lists, but I'll try to pull them together as best I can.
Okay.
So when Manfred actually did the quick step protocol, you have to remember he was only using oxygen air. He had the participant exercising at a target heart rate, and then he also was preloading them with supplements, and also vasodilators at the time were prescription drugs. So, if we just took the standard version of this, the quick step procedure, that was the methodology. Now, moving into adaptive contrast, I guess I kind of have to talk about this because the methodology has changed. With adaptive contrast, we're leveraging the body's ability to have more pressure and more vasodilation by creating more CO2 in the system and more nitric oxide in the system. And that's how we get results beyond what Manfred was doing. And in addition to that, you can further leverage these supplements to get, what I'll call the greatest result. So one of the best ones that I like, Manfred doesn't talk about it because it really wasn't available when he was doing his research, but it's coenzyme CoQ10. This is the enzyme that actually takes oxygen into our mitochondria. Without it, we fall short of that last step of actually getting the oxygen into where the Krebs cycle takes place and energy is created in our body. It's most often labeled as an antioxidant, but it's really a cofactor responsible for pulling oxygen into the cell. So a normal dose of CoQ10 is about 200 milligrams a day. What's nice about it is if you take CoQ10, I think anybody over the age of 45 should be taking it. You can buy a lot of varieties, but what's really nice about it is your body won't decrease its production of CoQ10 if you start supplementing with it. So you can get an added benefit for as long as you want to take it. And if you stop taking it, your body will, it won't have decreased its level based on you supplementing it. And it's probably one of the largest, breakthrough supplements in the last 10 years. The best CoQ10 comes from Japan. They've got the process, the best process for making it, and they make it cheaper. And I think it is Jaro bought a big plant in Japan. So Jaro is a pretty decent brand for relatively inexpensive CoQ10. I might be giving way too much detail here, but
that's okay. I think people want the specifics.
Yeah. So to bring it back, you can buy designer levels of CoQ10 that are $60 a bottle, and you can buy regular CoQ10 that was, something big and splashed in the market 10 years ago. You can buy that for like $15 a bottle. You'll have to figure out what your budget is and what value you're getting out of each one. Maybe I can come up with the brands that I really like and we can post it at the end. The other thing that we see that I feel is of great value is really in 2 phases. Arginine is a vasodilator and also helps the body produce nitric oxide, which is our natural vasodilator. We can improve our nitric oxide levels in our body simply by breathing in through our nose and doing calisthenics. And that can absolutely be part of a LiveO2 protocol. So arginine is interesting. We get a really great effect from arginine when we're younger. And then it starts to take a larger dose of arginine to get the same result as we get older. So about up to the age of 40, about 500 milligrams of arginine is going to give you a nice vasodilator effect. If you take too much of it, it will give you some loose bowel movements. So if you go to loose bowel movements, you just took too much. Keep in mind, with all supplements, you want the beneficial result without having too much of it. If you have too much of it, you basically end up with expensive urine. So, I like the idea of intermittently using supplements so your body really never gets used to it. If you wake up every day and take the same stack of supplements, your body basically recognizes that as, okay, this is here every day of the week. It's nothing new. It's nothing special. I'll take what I need now and discard the rest. If you take it intermittently, your body kind of recognizes, oh, Tom got into something good today. He's got a lot of arginine floating around. Let's go ahead and have a really nice response for him. So I like that idea, is you can take a quick dose of it and get a big response, and your body's not going to get accustomed to it. If you're over the age of 40, you want to go to something called, it's now called Human In. It used to be called Neo 40. And it is free nitric acid that helps your body create nitric oxide. So over the age of 40, go to Human In. We know the inventor. We've worked with the inventor. It's awesome stuff. You can take that every day, even though I like it better if you take it maybe a few times in a row and then take a day off, and your body's kind of getting the chance to equilibrate there. The other things that I like that are part of our protocols that we've gotten to play around with, as a Chinese medicine guy, I love the ginsengs, the renshin. And the research on renshin or ginseng, American ginseng, is going to be easier to get here in the US, is that it actually increases our oxygen utilization. And it's going to give you this nice big wave of energy throughout the day. And as long as you're supporting the rest of your body, hydrating correctly, it'll help you have a higher oxygen utilization. So Manford and some of the other folks that have worked with Oxygen Multistep really liked ginseng as a stimulant to help get a little bit more heart rate and a little bit more work capacity. Taking it in front of a session is a nice little pop for your day. The other ones that I like, you can buy certain supplements that are designed to take care of oxidative stress in the body. This is a question we get a lot, is like, oh, aren't I providing a lot of oxidative stress to my body? Don't I need to load up with vitamin C before the session? And my answer to that is, if you already have a lot of oxidative stress in your life and you haven't been well oxygenated and not exercising, absolutely go ahead and load up on vitamin C to buffer that oxidative stress. Now, I don't think it's necessary. It's one of those things where there's a line. I like the oxidative stress because it puts the bad bugs to bed. So these are cell wall deficient organisms that live in our body. If we can get them oxidized, they basically die. So maybe taking vitamin C after a session is a little bit better way to build the system, but still get the benefit of a big pop of oxidative stress. Now, as we move deeper into the LiveO2 training, your body does not have the oxidative stress that it was originally suffering with before you started. We've gotten the body oxygenated. We have increased the functional work capacity of the body, and it's now repairing itself and buffering itself against that oxidative stress. So when we have a lot of oxygen in our system, we actually have less oxidative stress. It's this middle ground, or middle to low energy side, that has a lot of oxidative stress. And that stress is really bad because we don't have the energy to repair our cells from it. So vitamin C is a big thing people look at to actually kind of buffer that. Instead of just straight vitamin C, I would recommend maybe a bioflavonoid supplement that has a little bit more diversity in it in terms of the vitamin C and some of the cofactors that are there, like we would normally get in food. All said and done, we're only looking at supplements if our diet isn't right. So this could very easily be the same advice of, hey, why don't you have a grapefruit a couple times a week in the morning? It's going to have a whole lot more, not only vitamin C, but bioflavonoids and all of these other, supporting factors that allow your body to nutritionally be supported. Same with something like resveratrol. It's a slow release antioxidant that comes from grape seeds. Drink some wine, eat some grapes. This stuff is here for you. It's enjoyable. You can take the supplement if you feel like you need it. But I feel like it's probably important to point out we're only looking at supplementation if this is not available from a dietary source. Let's see. NAC is a big one. I like NAC for a few reasons. Up to, 600 milligrams is a good place to start. You can get up to 1,200 in a dose. What you're doing here is helping clear your lung tissue. NAC is a long name for it, is N-acetylcysteine, and it's a precursor to glutathione. So you're giving your body the raw building block, or the majority of the raw building block, to actually create glutathione. And glutathione is our master antioxidant. It's stronger than any other antioxidant that we can eat. And as we grow older, our glutathione tends to drop. So this whole, decrease in oxygen absorption stunts our energy. And after our energy gets stunted, we basically become more efficient and produce less of this great glutathione stuff, which helps us really defend the most against oxidative stress. In the wintertime, if I have any type of respiratory cough that starts to come up where I start to feel a little bit phlegmy, or have a cough that kind of starts to become productive, I'll immediately hit it with glutathione and colloidal silver. And if I think about it, I'll take something called huang, which is the source of ephedra. It's a Chinese herb that's been basically, it became illegal in the US, but it's really great at just bumping up the metabolism and helping you kick out whatever might be there. You can easily go buy ephedrine over the counter. I think you have to sign a waiver now because it's one of the constituents for speed. Way too much information. But the idea there is NAC is about $7-8 a bottle. You can even buy it in some forms where it has some of the cofactors. And it's a great little go-to. The other one that I wanted to talk about is nicotinic acid. So this is a form of niacin. I would start at about 250 milligrams, and we do this as a niacin flush. My opinion on niacin is you actually don't want to take it daily. There's some recommendations out there to take it daily, but if I recall correctly, it starts to tweak your sugar levels or your insulin levels. So I like taking it in doses. I've taken up to 1,000 milligrams before doing a LiVO2 session to create a peripheral vasodilation. When you take niacin, start with 250 milligrams. I like the powder. You want the immediate release. So nicotinic acid is actually what you want there. You can go to someplace like bulksupplements.com and buy it by the kilogram. You'll never use all of that in your whole life. Only buy like 100 grams of it or something. But the idea is you're opening up your peripheral vascular system. You're going to get itchy. You're going to get red like a lobster. But it's a great thing to do on a day that you feel like you're well hydrated and you really want to go after a session and you really want to sweat and you really want to get your exterior open to release whatever it can. The perspective here is your skin is your third kidney, right? So utilize it to sweat when it's appropriate and you have the constitution to sweat. It takes a little bit of essence, but it's a really good way to detox. So I like niacin. We should probably, if we don't already, publish it in some type of method where we're doing a niacin flush. Maybe we'll call it a detox flush, but niacin is the main supplement you'll take. Try niacin first at about 200 to 250 milligrams. before you do a LiveO2 session with it, figure out how long it takes you to kind of get at the peak result. Stay nice and hydrated. Some people feel like the itching is too much for them. They say it feels like bugs crawling on their skin. I like it, but the thing that happens to me when I do a niacin flush is I don't like to have clothing touching my skin. And there's a funny story where my wife is coming home and I'm running around the house red as a lobster with no clothes on. And she walked in the door and looked at me like, have you been at the pool all day? And then she realized I was completely red. And I just saw where her mind went of like, has he been nude sunbathing in the pool all day? And I had to explain to her, I was like, here's what I've done. And you remember that stuff that we took one time and you didn't like it because it made your skin itchy. I took a whole lot of that and did a LiveO2 session, and now I'm just trying to fill up on water before I get back to this phone call.
That's what I'm doing, I promise.
If you work at home, this is something that happens. So that's the niacin story. I can't believe I went there. B vitamins are awesome. C vitamins are awesome. A nice quality E vitamin is really good. I'm a big fan of selenium. So we're going to have these resources for you following the podcast, and page 127 of the Oxygen Multi-Step book talks about the supplements as well. So it's a good way to leverage the results of your LiveO2 training. And, I'm relatively up to speed on it, but I know this whole market is moving so fast. There are awesome ones that do work with platelet aggregation. That's a big part of our blood. Nattokinase is a great one to take. There's also one protein called, let's see, I think the protein is called lubricanase, and it is a supplement made Canada RNA, but it's called Beluque. And Beluque, you might have to go through a practitioner to get it. It's the protein in earthworms. But yeah, right. And it actually comes out of Chinese medicine. They used to wine fry earthworms and make a tea out of it, which isn't as bad as it sounds. It smells exactly like bacon. But one of the indications for this tea was to help your extremities get blood flow. And you think of the energy of an earthworm going through the soil. This is the protein coming from the earthworm that's so functional in your body to help your blood flow. So this is a wide open field. And if we had a supplement expert, we could probably keep them busy all day long with, what to do and how to get it from Whole Foods, or what the best supplement to buy is. It's easily our most requested training topic. And we've been letting it ride with minimal advice, but that's first time we've actually tried to talk about it. So that's a good point worth.
I would also encourage, if you guys are listening to this and you are a part of the Facebook group, go ahead and share up in the comments on this post of what supplements you're using. I know that some people have previously shared, I believe Paula Pratt, who is one of our more active users in the group, has shared previously what she uses. So Ashoka, I hope that answers your question. You can also let us know what supplements you are using with people you're training if you have gotten into that yet. Maybe you haven't, and that's why you asked the question. Alrighty, let's move on. Owen asks, and I feel like we were just talking about this, Tom, on our other episode, so maybe this will sound repetitive for us today, but it's new for Owen and our listeners. Can LiveO2 be used to increase breath hold time for people engaging in activities like competitive swimming or freediving? What protocol variations would you recommend for this aspect of performance specifically? Or do the normal protocols adequately expand this hypoxic performance capability?
Okay. Awesome question, Owen. One of the things that I point to is competitive free diving. we were earlier on a podcast where we talked about the pressure in our body and how, we want that pressure. We want to be able to jam more air into our lungs, by breathing in deeply and expanding them and pushing air into all these little cracks and crevices and pushing it into the bloodstream. So breath control is a huge thing. The place I go to there is Buteyko Breathing. ButeykoBreathing.com is a good source. You'll find many of their training classes in it. What competitive divers have figured out is basically how to hold their breath for 4 or 5 minutes while they're doing some form of swimming down or swimming up into pressurized environments. And this is, I want to say they're going down like 200 meters now, which is insane. So they figured out their method of hyperventilating, and then they will basically swallow air. And it's not that the air goes to your stomach, the air is actually going to your lungs. So they're trying to start with as pressurized lungs as they can, so that as they go deeper, that air is pushing into the body and they actually have oxygen they can utilize. When it comes back to the LiveO2 system, not quite as extreme of an environment, but you can still do sublimation breaths and breath holds. Now, the key here is you need to be at a place where your breathing is under control. If you're basically breathing at the top of your respiratory capacity and try to hold your breath, you're not going to hold it for very long. So usually at the end of a session, executive trainer Steve is one of the amazing guys to watch do this, where he'll have somebody sit down, take a few deep breaths, and then blow everything out. And you can experiment whether you want to do that on -O2 or positive O2 air. And then we'll also do breath holds. And usually we're doing breath holds when we breathe in a oxygen air. What we hear back from participants that are doing this is their breath holds are in some cases doubling. We had a couple people that went beyond doubling, but most were able to get a really good result. And they were practicing some Wim Hof breathing techniques following LiveO2 sessions. So they had moved on from the LiveO2 session, and now we're relaxed and laying down. And I think what LiveO2 is providing is, those 15 to 20 minutes of oxygen saturation that you would normally do for about an hour in a Wim Hof protocol that allows you to hold your breath. We're creating that much faster, preparing the body to hold its breath and be comfortable doing that, because it does have a lot of oxygen dissolved in the plasma. So it's definitely something you can play around with. Like most things that we get into when they're in the top kind of cutting edge echelon, we don't have a protocol written for them. There's certain mechanisms you want to understand, but then, this is something that's relatively intimate, because you're most likely going to be the participant, or you're going to be coached by somebody who can make the observations in you as far as what's the next step in your breathing program or your sublimation. But the idea is, in all of this, it's you controlling your response to breathing. And that's something that you have to listen to your body about. If I gave you a protocol that said, yeah, take, 5 minutes of O2 and then go lay on the floor and hold your breath for a minute and a half, that wouldn't be the protocol that would be right for basically anybody. We're setting a mark, but what we're losing is the fact that you can listen to your body, and it might tell you at 45 minutes you're done, or you might cruise into a minute 45, no problem, and you'd never gotten that far before. So it's something to play around with. So I don't have a normalized protocol, because I feel like there is a theoretical understanding which I'm trying to address and send you to the right resources, and then you simply have to listen to and watch your body. Now, the last part of your question actually gets me really excited because you're asking about expanding hypoxic performance capability. And everyone that we talk to in the professional team realm and that's extremely competitive, you know, they want to tell us that all of these short bursts events, you know, highly competitive contact sports are all anaerobic based. And so their methodology talks about that, but I don't think they actually really have the system to do that. So if you remember the podcast where we talked with Scott from Kaiser, and we're talking about a piece of equipment that Kaiser makes called the Air Runner, and it's used to train football players in their sprinting. Now, if you really wanted to train somebody in anaerobic land, put them on -O2 and have them on this, you know, high effort piece of equipment. Doesn't have to be an air runner, but that's definitely the piece of equipment for these football guys. And have them run their sprints on -O2, and you will be challenging their anaerobic pathways way more than you could ever do on room air. You can use the LiveO2 system to give them pulses of oxygen so they can recover aerobically where they need to. You know, the body does need oxygen even if it's in an anaerobic event. We just want to push it a little bit more deeper into the anaerobic pathways by taking away some of the oxygen. So that's what I would play around with, is running your sprints on the -O2, pulsing the oxygen where you need it. And when I say pulsing oxygen, we're talking 15 to 30 seconds. In some cases, it's 5 breaths. We've had some people that they'll saturate all the way back up to 99 with 3 breaths. And then we can go back into the anaerobic pathways and practice this hypoxic performance. And anytime you have 2 teams competing, I believe it's always decided on how strong their hypoxic performance is. You know, if you take a soccer match, for example, the team that can go down and score and then very quickly have another rally and attempt to score again is the team that gets right out front. And that second time that they're going back to score, they're doing that based on their hypoxic training performance. And that's where you simply get outclassed in your physiology very quickly. Some of it is a mental game, but you know, that mental game is only there because the physical training has been done where that person knows I can spend another minute and a half in this state and still function, and we can go get the job done. So it's a huge advantage. So Owen, I think you're completely on to the right scenario. You got to take it case by case, and you got to become that super trainer. If you want more information, I'll get you hooked up with all of our resources to, you know, help you go there. There's some learning to do, and then there's just a lot of experiential training that I think will help you get there with people.
Cool. So Owen, I'm sure that answers your question. And I know, I think Owen has just set up his own site or own location as well. And maybe we can get permission to link up to that here from him, but hopefully that helps you with your training, Owen. Okay, next, Tom, we're going to wrap up with a question from our good buddy, Paula. She is wondering about plaque and parasites. So Paula asks, how does AC, adaptive contrast that is, kill parasites? Do you have any suggested parasite protocols? So Tom, maybe you can kind of elaborate on parasites and plaques. I know nothing about this, so I'm actually excited to hear this answer.
Okay, and this is a good one. We held this one over until, you know, we could, I think, give it the due time that it needs. You know, towards the end of this question, you know, hey Paula, by the way, Paula is asking, you know, it seems like oxygen has this innate intelligence, and the substances, you know, getting the substances where they need to go in the body most. I agree with you, and I see that intelligence because we have given the body everything it needs, and it has the resilience or the energy actually to power this system, right? And prioritize itself. I love these words that she's using. Now, we have to dissect this a little bit, because a lot in the body is called parasites. Now, there are viruses, there's bacteria, there are yeast forms. Some of these science has really well defined. They're also literally parasites like worms and, other things that aren't fun to think about being in your body, but we can be host to a lot of things. These parasites are generally recognized as cell wall deficient. They're very simple in form and function. And the huge advantage our body has on these types of parasites are that we can sustain more stresses than the parasites can. We can take certain herb supplements that'll cause our environment to become very challenging for these types of parasites. And in our physiology, we might feel a little bit crummy for a day or two, but we're knocking down the parasites. We can, there's all types of ways to knock down these parasites, but the cell wall deficient ones, it's important to remember antibiotics don't touch them. So they become hugely imbalanced when we take antibiotics. Because we're basically killing off a lot of their natural competition. But when we train and receive a nice flow of oxygenation, our body has the protective pathway of our antioxidant buffering system. Think bioflavonoids, vitamin C, master antioxidant glutathione. That's our buffering capacity. And then we also have respiratory enzymes, which help us actually achieve that superoxygenation. If we go back and look at the physiological mechanisms in the body, and look at how our body is designed to utilize oxygen, these mechanisms can line up in such a way that we can defeat all of these cell wall deficient bugs, simply by exercising and getting nicely oxygenated. And with LiveO2, we can do an awesome job of that in 15 minutes. So this is why when we're working with somebody and they have a longer standing chronic condition and they have an imbalance in their biome, they'll do a LiveO2 session and they'll get this massive die-off of these cell wall deficient organisms. Jerry Tennant does a wonderful job talking about these. You can look him up and read about the mechanisms that our body has to keep these things in check. The die-off of them can cause us to feel crummy, but in that rebalancing, we're recreating our physiology so that it's more productive. These cell wall deficient organisms, their primary job in our body is to poke holes in our cells and erode our structure. So we have to, combat them with oxidative stress through oxygenation. And that oxygenation actually provides us with enough functional energy that we can repair the damage that was done by the parasites and also done by the oxidative stress. You got to give yourself enough oxygen. You got to give yourself the right building blocks to do that. But it wisely, your body takes care of that. So that's the first level of parasites that we see immediate results with. Now, there are larger parasites. We get into, more of the standard viruses and bacterias and, the worms, the nematodes, right? These are going to be able to sustain more oxidative stress, and their environment will be uncomfortable and they might not thrive, but they can still kind of subsist and still be problematic. So I really like a company called Blessed Herbs. They have a cleansing process where you're going through and cleansing your organs, but from maybe about the first about day 7 through about day 24, you're taking a large paracleanser and a small paracleanser as part of the supplementation program. And incidentally, that's a really great thing to do during the summertime. Your body's going to have a little bit higher temperature. It's easier to get outside and sweat. And when you can create the internal environment of, these bugs not being comfortable, your immune system can get in front of them, and it becomes your body's process of actually kicking those things to the exterior. And this is the formal way where you finally get something out of your system. Your body, when it's too busy and you get sick, and maybe the temperature's not right, or you don't have enough constitutional force to really break through the pathogen, it'll kind of tuck things away in crevices and just kind of keep them there. And, we call this the sluices and waterways. But when those things are full, your body doesn't have any place to tuck things anymore. It's a good idea to think about taking out the trash and emptying the bucket. So, once a year, you can absolutely do a cleanse. We'll post the link to Blessed Herbs. It's not expensive. And you're going to feel crummy for a few days. But the idea is, if you're getting rid of things you don't need, your body's going to work a whole lot better. I've done this cleanse, and after being on it for about 5 days, your eyes are just amazingly bright. And to me, that says, okay, we're supporting the liver and gallbladder, which are, your main metabolic pathways to getting things out of your body through, your normal bowel movements and that type of thing. Let's see. The next part of this question, this is a deep one, right? It gets into the plaques of our body. There is a doctor of osteopathy named T.C. McDaniels. And if you're really interested in this subject, you need to read what he has to say about it. What T.C. McDaniels says about this is that our body, due to our environment and our refined food process, has become imbalanced in its electrolytes. And the best example of this is sodium in our food. Sodium is a +2 cation, and we have to balance that with negative anions so that we basically don't get these clumpings of minerals and plaques in our arteries. He talks a lot about the pipe that has hard water running through it. And eventually that pipe gets a lining on the inside of all these minerals that are just clumping together simply because like attracts like. And if we can rebalance that with the right cationic and anionic blend, then we don't get this clumpy physiology in our vascular system. Go to drtcmcdaniels.com. They're out in Tucson, Arizona. And the whole idea here is, he calls it Zeta Aid, but it is the anionic balance to our, cationic world that we live in. It's not just coming from our diet, it's coming from our environment. When we're running a clothes dryer, for instance, that thing is just spewing out positive ions. It's the exact opposite of a waterfall in nature. Our body loves negative ions. It sounds counterintuitive, but that's what makes us work, and that's our free energy, and that's what our connection to nature provides us. Our water is a long way from being what it should. You can watch the series that Gaia put out there. I think it's called The Miracle of Water. This will change the way you think about your body and the world and your thoughts. We're basically programming water with every action and every thought. But for about $20, you can get a packet of Zeta Aid. It looks like a pack of white material. You dissolve it in distilled or reverse osmosis water, and then you can make your drinking water from that. And the other side of this is you have to cut out all of these refined foods and, not eat the foods that are packaged up in cardboard and have a bunch of salt in them so they become tasty. But if you can balance that out, your body will not create and start to eliminate these plaques that it has created in our vascular system. And this is one of the reasons why our vascular systems become rigid, is because they're reinforced and patched in a way that they're no longer dynamic and flexible. The other thing that is really good for helping clear out the arteries is a enzyme called serapeptase. You can look that up and find out, the dosage of it, how long to take it. With enzymes, I like cycling them so that you don't take them for too long and end up enzymatically deconstructing too much. But that's a great thing to help your arteries actually clear themselves. Where else can I go with this? Yes, we want to actually create the right physiology where we don't accumulate the plaques, and the right physiology will actually help us over time tear down those plaques and dissolve them in our fluids of our body. Need to be, and it's something called, we said this product's called Zeta Aid. There's something called Zeta Potential, and it's a component of our fluids in our bloods where we have enough of the cations and anions where it creates this nice suspended fluid, and nothing is too attracted to another thing. And if we're doing that, we won't get this clumpy physiology that accumulates on our arteries. So check out drtcmcdaniels.com. I think he has since passed away, but somebody is running it. Order the book, order the supplements. It's all less than $30, and get on that process and stay on it. That's the best advice I can give you about metabolizing your either a mineral plaque or a cholesterol plaque. Go to serapeptase.
So I think, Tom, that wraps it up. I just wanted to throw one question at you that is not on the sheet, but I know that you studied Chinese medicine. You're super knowledgeable about physiology, and it's just really amazing how you can just rattle things off. And I know that you spent a lot of time studying, but I'm curious for people who want to take more ownership of their physiology. That's something that you always stress, and that at LiveO2 as a company, we feel very strongly about and want to enable people to do that. So that being said, do you have any recommendations for people who just want to get a better understanding of how their own body works without potentially going back to school and pursuing a biology degree or something? But does anything come to your mind, like maybe an easy to read book or an online course? I just wanted to kind of throw that out there for a personal question, because I would really just like to, I guess, up my game some.
Yeah. Wow. I'm flattered you're asking, because I approach a lot of this really maybe not knowing where I've been. It's just, to me, it's where I've been. So sharing it is a really, really nice honor. Wow. For me, I look at it as kind of every time I go to bed, I'm resting my body. And in the morning when I wake up, I have to get back in my body. And you have to learn how to be caretaker of your body, right? And there's so many perspectives here. When we first started the Whole Health Network, there's this whole idea of these are foundational things, and then these are ideas that are, in our universe, and at any moment, we can go from the very foundational things that we ought to be doing every day to having this miraculous experience of, it's spontaneous healing. It just went away. I'm not sure what happened, but something popped into my awareness and I realized I didn't have to have that knee trouble anymore. and to me, that's amazing that all of these things can be happening at once. Find out what interests you on that spectrum. I'd be curious to see if I could pull that chart up again. But it encompasses everything from our drinking water and our environment, all the way up through all of these modalities of chemistry and energy. There's something in there. And the highest ones, get into belief systems. And, I want to call it spirituality. I don't want to call it religion, but they're different, right? But the spirituality of you being out in the world doing what you need to do, there's going to be something in there that speaks to you. You might become a tea nut, right? You might just get into teas and realize, okay, if I can get into teas, I can decoct this nice little tea that helps me feel really good. And I'll go to it when I'm stressed out, or if I need a little stimulant, I can do a green tea version of this. You might be somebody that really loves cooking. Get into nutritional cooking. If you're somebody that goes nuts on the vitamin aisle in the store, get in there and explore that. Become, a supplement person. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's something that's going to speak to everybody. I have a friend who's really into the aromatherapy. Very powerful tools. I think it's almost too much when we look at the whole thing and we start to think about it. But find that one
overwhelming.
Yeah, find that one little niche. It might be oxygen training for you. Biohacking is this huge idea. And very quickly you realize, wow, I need to spend a lot of time to comprehend all of this. But, you can become an oxygen expert, or a red light, expert, a wavelength expert, or a frequency expert, and just take little dwells into those. And your body is the sounding board. We're not always listening to it, and we're not always aware of what we're putting into it, but at least that gives you kind of a little place to test things out. As far as one source, I mean, we love Dave Asprey. I love the fact that he started the whole biohacking thing with basically a cookbook, and you're finding out what food you can put in your body and how it works. There's some Chinese medicine books that are really great and have this graceful way of explaining life. The first book most everybody's required to read before they start Chinese medicine school is A Web with No Weaver. And, the interesting idea is that you're never going to really figure out where you're created from, but you are able to reach out in your immediate environment and know who you are and where you're at. And that overlays into the body's physiology, where you can work on this picture, and you start with the edges. And as you get towards the center, it becomes a little bit more complicated, but also more important. And, I'm thinking of Edgar Casey, a really interesting guy, who had this ability to tap into the Akashic records. And his greatest advice was know yourself. And, I looked at those things because they're inspiring. I remember growing up, and I'll give an example of having, 3 friends, or really 4 really good friends. And one was really into selling houses, and the other one's into building houses. And their idea was, everybody needs a house, so that's going to be a really good thing for me to go into. And another friend really loved working on cars, and his deal was, well, everybody has a car, so I'm gonna work on those. I'm gonna work on really nice cars and do it better than anybody else. And I remember kind of not really knowing where I was, and what I looked at the moment was my hands. I was just kind of staring at my hand. And for me, it was kind of the realization of like, okay, everybody's got hands, and they have an important job to do. And if, for me, it was only being able to see far enough into my hands, but knowing that they were, had an important task, and that they were healing hands. And everybody has a body. We've all got to figure this body thing out. The travesty is we often don't pay enough attention to our body, and we don't listen to it enough. So it's where my recommendation comes in. Pick the one thing that you really enjoy doing. We'll be really super flattered if it's LiveO2 and you want to go as far as creating a facility and helping a lot of people. It might be yoga, it might be qigong. Pick that one little thing that just completely jives with you or has your interest, and that maybe you can't quite figure out. There's some learning to do there.
Cool. Well, thanks, Tom, for the insight on that. What I took away from that is really to just listen to your body and what speaks to you. And I think something that you kind of made clear is that I suffer from the overwhelm. So all of this stuff is becoming so interesting and so exciting. And it's just, you get so excited and overwhelmed that you're just paralyzed. So in my case, I feel like what you've just recommended, to just kind of chill out, take a break, listen to what your body is responding to, and that can guide your interests. So that, Tom, wraps up today's Q&A. Thanks for taking time to record the second half. I know that we kind of spliced this episode together. So thanks for your time today, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the LiveO2 podcast. If you like our show and want to know more, check out our website, liveO2.com. That's live, the letter O as in oxygen, and the number 2.com. You can subscribe on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. If you like our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. Join us next time as we continue to examine how you too can create abundant health.
Viewpoints expressed in this podcast are not made by medical professionals, nor should any part of this podcast be interpreted as medical advice. LiveO2 products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Consult with your physician before beginning any exercise program. LiveO2 statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. For any suspected or known illness or health concern, always consult with your physician or healthcare provider prior to the purchase or use of any product. LiveO2 has attempted to present information from the literature, books, and other references, as well as information about our products as accurately as possible, but you should be aware that the Food and Drug Administration has not approved or evaluated any of the information contained in our literature or on our site. Any literature reference or direct link to a specific product is for your information or convenience and may not be construed as an enticement to purchase, and further is not intended or implied to be used in the mitigation, diagnosis, treatment, cure, or prevention of any disease.